Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of Health Talks with Dr. Trinh. The one show, maybe the only show that shows you the path to a healthier life, one conversation at a time. And today, well, we're bringing back for a second conversation an amazing young woman. Well, I'll let her tell her story here. It's pretty incredible, the work that she's doing with her father and the impact it's having on originally not just COVID, but now another perhaps inhalation disease here. Let's talk with Dr. Trinh. Bring him in. Who'd you bring back?
Hey, Paul, thanks. Very happy to bring back Kate Chiang, who, when we had her on 2 years ago, she was the young, inexperienced age of 16.
Yeah, right.
And now she is the mature, more experienced age of 18.
Absolutely. She's way past her youth. Now she's well into her. Contributing to society here, right?
Absolutely, and heading straight out of high school and heading to medical school, actually.
Unbelievable.
How does that happen, Kate? Wow.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I remember having excellent discussions last time, and I'm excited to share with you some amazing or an important idea that has been on my mind recently. So in terms of going straight to medical school, I'm going to University College Dublin in Ireland. And in Europe and India, you're able to go directly to medical school from high school. Since I had been doing research and really studying medicine over the past couple of years, I realized it's something I want to do for the rest of my life. And it just made the most sense of me to dive right into my studies.
So, Kate, you don't look Irish. I'm Irish. How do you get to go to the University of Dublin here?
I just applied as an international student. And the application process was actually quite easy, I think, compared to U.S. schools. I just had to submit one essay, so it wasn't too bad.
So you get to skip all those 4 years of, English literature, and but you're gonna miss all those golden opportunities for beer bongs and for video games and for all that. That was the 4 years of undergraduate. I don't remember what I studied, but I remember what I did.
That's true. I'll definitely be missing out on the college experience, but I'm really excited to meet new people and to learn so many new things about such a new country, right? Yeah. Living in a new country. I think that's part of growing up.
Well, you're now an honorary Irishman here, as is Dr.
That's
Dr.
awesome.
Trinh here. All right, so today, let me see if I can summarize. The last time you were on, you were doing some amazing research. Your father is what? He's a clinical researcher at UCI or something like that?
He's a clinical professor of medicine at UCI, and he currently received a teaching position at California University of Sciences and Medicine Medical School in Colton, California.
Like a new medical school or a newer medical school.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, so, and as we were talking in preparation for this, once you started my brain remembering, I remember vividly the conversation that we had, because your father, this was during COVID, everybody was scrambling to try and find some treatment for COVID. We were all desperate because people were dying. And your father, as many others did, started looking at current drugs that maybe were being used to cure or treat something else. And maybe it had some effect on COVID as well. And your father found one in Japan, a drug that was what? It was being used. What's the drug and what was it being used for?
So the drug is called rimatribin, and it has been used for the treatment of allergic rhinitis, allergies, for over 20 years in Japan.
Mm-hmm. And he somehow found this through some research on his and felt it did what for COVID? He had some pretty amazing anecdotal evidence that it had a real effect on COVID treatment, right?
Right. So Basically, there is an oxylipin or lipid mediator storm in COVID-19 that has been largely ignored. This lipid mediator storm causes blood clotting and suppression of the immune system in COVID-19. So,
And that's when it gets deadly, because it moves from your head into your lung, and then all of a sudden this storm erupts in your body, and that's when it can go from a bad case of the flu, feeling like a bad case of the flu, to something life-threatening.
Right, right. And we really wanted to target this disease with a safe and affordable medication such as Rematriband, because Rematriband has over 20 years of safety data, right? And it can be used to target this lipid mediator storm in COVID.
Now, unfortunately, the FDA or who regulates this, would it be the FDA, I guess, here?
The government, like funding organizations like the NIH.
Right. You were writing you then got recruited to be his researcher, and you're submitting research papers. You're writing in, say, here's the evidence we found and here's the data. Please give us a chance to research this drug at the ripe old age of 16. How did you get recruited into this role?
So my father had approached me to create a figure for him, right? And he drew it out. And I was thinking, oh, what is all these mechanisms, right? Because he was drawing out a rationale. And on my own, I created the figure, and then I decided to really look into the mechanisms to try to figure out and understand how this all works. And it just caught my interest, my fascination, and I realized I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Wow. What do you think of that, Dr. Trinh? Her father starts sketching out to his daughter what he thinks he's discovered, and she takes this and runs with it.
The student has now become the master.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, last time she was here 2 years ago, I think she had maybe 6, 7 publications under her name. I think it's doubled that now, right? 11-ish or so.
Yeah.
In peer-reviewed scientific medical journals is Kate's name.
Isn't that a little amazing that they would even consider publishing something from a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old? How did you get them to even review this data seriously?
I mean, of course, I was fortunate enough to have my father on the paper, of course, and he really guided me through the writing process. It didn't come overnight. I had to keep practicing and keep asking him questions. I would call him in the middle of the night and try to figure out different things. So I'm very, very fortunate. And of course, I'm affiliated with Care Biosciences and now University College Dublin.
Wow.
Nice.
All this credentials. Did you have many credentials at 18, Dr. Trinh? I don't think.
The only credential I had was I got really high points on Pac-Man.
Yeah, right. I think I was the pinball king in my dorm at 18. I think that's all I could be. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was really good at video games and usually did pretty well. Those are my...
All right. So we've got this amazing young woman here who has now come back to tell us that this drug that they stumbled upon, this long-standing drug used to treat one thing, maybe has some use on another inhalation disease, silicosis. Tell us about how you discovered that and what that is.
So just to give like a little bit of a recap for COVID, Rematriband successfully treated my very own grandmother in 2021 when she fell ill with severe COVID-19.
This was like in India or someplace or what?
In India, right. And because no medications were working and her oxygen levels fell to 82%. Within 24 hours of taking the medication, her O2 levels went up to the 90s and she went on to make a full recovery. Rematriband treated her along with 3 other severe COVID-19 patients in India. So we managed to actually get funding to test Rematriband in a clinical trial of hospitalized patients, which is currently ongoing in India.
Okay.
Given that...
Stop for 1 second. So why, given the data and the published information that you got, why was the FDA, it seems like nobody was paying attention here in the United States. We're all desperately searching for something. The former president was pursuing one drug that was controversial. Everybody's running around saying there might be something already we have that can be repurposed for this use. Why did nobody respond? Why wasn't this front page news in medical science today in the United States?
Well, I guess it wasn't front page news because we're not a big company. We're not like Pfizer or Moderna, but we actually got funding from Open Philanthropy, which is a foundation created by the Facebook founders, and they wanted to put their money into philanthropic use. So we received a funding for the acute phase of the clinical trial from Open Philanthropy. As you may know, COVID-19 is also associated with with long COVID,
Yeah.
which is the persisting symptomatology that can occur after recovery from the acute phase.
Right.
And there are over 200 symptoms identified in long COVID.
Wow.
We have a 1 year follow-up phase of our study, and that follow-up phase is funded by the government, by BARDA.
Okay, and is that by the United States government or this is the Indian government?
A U.S. government.
U.S. government. So you did get some response. People did pay attention. Because
Yeah.
when you were on, you were like, we got this thing, we found it. Nobody seems to pay much attention to it. Everybody's scrambling around looking for something. We might have something here.
Right.
All right, so you got this funding and you're pursuing that. But in the process, you discovered what? This might work for some other disease that I never even heard of.
So we've also been looking at other diseases that have a similar mechanism of action as COVID-19, this lipid mediator storm, which can be targeted with rimatroban. And there is a pressing, probably one of the biggest public health issues that immigrant workers are facing, and that's silicosis. Despite what the name suggests, silicosis is no laughing matter.
Yeah.
It is caused by silica dust inhalation. To give you a perspective, quartz countertops are perhaps one of the most popular types of countertops used in the US.
I got them all over my house, right?
Yeah, right. Because of their durability and their ease of maintenance. Even Martha Stewart had recommended the use of quartz countertops.
Right.
It is made up of 95% silica dust bonded together by a resin.
Mm-hmm.
So when workers are cutting and fabricating these quartz countertops, it leads to release of silica dust particles that they inhale. This causes silicosis or scarring of the lungs. This progressive scarring or fibrosis can lead to need for lung transplantation. So it is
lung transplants. What, Dr. Trinh, you're a doctor. I know there's a million things you got to memorize here. Have you ever heard anybody talk about this silly disease called silicosis? Not so silly.
Yeah, very rare. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. It's stuff that you read in medical school and are on board exams, but it doesn't get the press that it needs. And I'm glad it's getting some attention now because this potential exposure is in common everyday, life and kitchens and things of that sort.
Yeah, I mean, given the prevalence of this product, I don't know anybody that doesn't have some kind of either corian, so that's probably a different product, or quartz countertops. We've all got some sort of what we call granite quartz countertops somewhere here in our house because that's what everybody uses. And yes, those things obviously have to get cut into shape. And when you cut through them, somebody's breathing that dust because I never see them wearing any sort of masks or anything when they install them in my house.
Right, exactly. So bringing awareness to this issue is very important because there's mitigation strategies like wearing masks during cutting and even water suppression of dust release, meaning that when they're cutting through the quartz, then water is being progressively released on the area so that it doesn't let the silica dust fly off.
Right. And there must be in the bigger factories where they prefabricate the shape, you get a big slab. Those slabs have been cut down from something probably much bigger. I don't know what the machine churns out when it does all this. I didn't realize it. I thought it was real quartz. I thought they were going in, and somehow digging this stuff up out of the dirt like pool table slate or something. And I thought, there were big quarries somewhere that they're bringing this stuff. All they're doing is just taking dust and bonding it together and making it look pretty.
Yes, exactly. It's artificial or engineered stone.
Wow. Okay. Well, once again, I've learned something. All right. So your product that you've been, I won't say playing with, investigating, that you've discovered, that you've been focused on, this product in Japan, is it available here in the U.S. or is it not an approved drug here in the U.S.?
So it's not available in the US, only in Japan, especially because it's a generic medication. So pharma companies haven't really jumped onto it. And we have been looking at this over the past couple of years peripherally, but this really was brought to our attention by a study published in JAMA Internal Medicine just recently. They reported on 52 patients with silicosis in California. All of these patients were Spanish-speaking Latino men with a median age of 45 years. 51 of the patients were immigrant workers. So this disease really disproportionately affects minorities.
Because when you go hire somebody to do this, I hate to say it, most of them are probably immigrants or Hispanic immigrants that are doing the work. I don't know why that's true, but those tend to be the labor force that we bring in to do these home improvement projects here or work in these factories to produce this product there.
20 of the patients had presented with progressive massive fibrosis, meaning that they presented with the severe disease, the severe form of the disease, 10 of which were fatal. Oh. And 30 of the patients actually had delayed diagnosis. So a lot of times when they come in to see the physician, they are misdiagnosed with another
because they're
type
just coughing or whatever, and they say, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's something else."
Right. So the silicosis is not caught early on, and then they eventually progress into more severe form until it's too late.
Well, because Dr. Trinh says it's rare. It's not the first thing on people's mind, right, doctor? It'd be the first thing. It's not the first thing you think of when somebody walks in and exhibits some symptoms.
You just think it's dust.
Yeah.
And, it's dirty and you're doing construction or whatever it is, but you don't realize this stuff's building up in your lungs and causing long-term damage.
I would think, I'm not trying to get ahead of this here, but I would think that there would be some sort of law firms that would be jumping on this and realizing that there's some claim to be made against the manufacturers of this product, that if they're not properly teaching the people, particularly not the installers so much, they're all little mom and pop guys doing this, but the people who make the product. I'm thinking of the same thing that happened with what's the stuff that they use on brakes and everything here? Help me, I'm blanking here. What's the and the asbestos, and they had the long asbestos claims, and it took 20-30 years for these. A little inhalation of asbestos was causing major problems and death and other things, but it took 20 years to manifest itself. And in the 40s, 50s, 60s, people were just working with asbestos in factories or in housing, and nobody was thinking anything about it. Now they ripped all that stuff out because they found out that even a little bit of inhalation causes a major problem in your body, right?
Right. Actually, I would like to point out that in an interview with the authors, Dr. Carrie Redlich from Yale, she pointed out that there's not enough surveillance of silicosis in the U.S. Right. So there's around 100,000 individuals working in this hazardous field, right, in the U.S. Surveillance reports from Australia estimate that there's around 25%. That 25% of these workers have silicosis. But since we don't monitor it here, how do you know there's a problem if you don't even look at it?
It's an immigrant population. They don't make a lot of money. They don't speak English. They don't go see healthcare providers very often. And when they do, it's a rare disease that doesn't come to mind. All of this sounds like the perfect storm, not just whatever you called it, what's the storm word that you use to describe the disease itself here?
The lipid mediator storm?
A lipid mediator storm. So it's not just a lipid mediator. What is a lipid mediator? So lipid has something to do with blood, Dr. Trinh. What's a lipid mediator storm?
Lipid is fat.
Right.
And lipid is required to do a lot of cellular transactions, I would call it, whether it is allowing for vitamins to be absorbed, fat-soluble vitamins. It's made up of our cellular membrane is basically a fatty membrane, and so a lot of transactions occurred, and it requires that lipid, and that dysfunction can occur with these types of exposures.
And what is the dysfunction? So a lipid mediator storm, that sounds like something's out of control, something's gone haywire.
Dr. Kate?
Dr. Kate. So, yeah, well, not so long you'd be calling her Dr. Kate. So explain then, we take this lipid, and what is the mediator storm? What is that phenomenon?
So like Dr. Trinh said, lipid mediators are actually very important for cellular functions. But the problem comes when there's too many lipids, right, in your lungs, right? And this leads to a storm. Then that can cause inflammation, immune cell recruitment to the lungs, and the progression of fibrosis. So there's always this yin yang where like too much of anything is bad.
But when it turns into a storm, that sounds like it's gone out of control, right?
Right.
And so therefore, and this is when the disease, at least in COVID, becomes deadly. Is that the same thing with silicosis? Does this create this same storm effect in your body where it gets out of control here and then starts scarring your lungs, and therefore your blood, you're not inhaling enough oxygen and all these other things here?
Yes, it appears so. So actually in 2021, a study from one of the top universities in China came out of a silicosis mouse model where they exposed mice to silica inhalation. And they found that when they treated these mice with rimatroband, which targets this lipid mediator storm, specifically the lipid mediators thromboxane and prostaglandin D2, rimatroband reduced inflammation, it reduced cardiopulmonary dysfunction, and most importantly, it reduced the fibrosis associated with silica inhalation.
And fibrosis is what? The scarring of the fiber?
Scarring, yeah. So definitely this lipid mediator storm is definitely playing a role.
And Dr. Trinh, one more medical explanation here. So fibrosis is what? Any sort of like cystic fibrosis. That's the only one I've ever heard of.
Fibrosis is the result of typically persistent chronic inflammation that damages the lungs or any organ actually, and that damage results in scarring, and that scarring is called fibrosis. And so in this study that was published it's a preclinical study in rats and mice and all that, showing that this medication that is only available in Japan can influence that process of fibrosis in reducing inflammation. Is that about right, Kate?
Yes, right.
All right, so I know I'm going to ask a question. I think I already know the answer. The answer is money, as my late father used to say. What's the question? I'll tell you the answer already. It's money. If that drug is so effective in Japan, why hasn't it been why isn't it available here in this country? And it sounds like because it's already gone off patent, it's therefore generic, it's in the public domain, and if I produce it, anybody can copy it, and therefore I can't make any money at it. Is that about the problem if I listed it here? Why isn't it available here?
Right, exactly. The money is an issue. To give you a perspective, right, half of the workers that were in this JAMA study are either uninsured or they have emergency Medi-Cal. So they cannot afford expensive treatments, let alone a lung transplant,
right,
for silicosis. And they rely, right, on generic medications, right, which rimatroband can really help, right, can do a lot of good for these patients. And two, we are very fortunate to have free clinics that provide free medical services to these patients. One that I would actually like to point out is the Lestenac Free Clinic, founded in 1979 by Sister Mary Therese. it started off as a single room to help to treat children with colds and scrapes, but it eventually turned into 26 clinics across Southern California. And they're doing a lot of good for these patients with the volunteer help of medical professionals. So I actually had the opportunity to witness firsthand their incredible medical services when I shadowed my father, since he's a nephrologist and he practices clinical medicine as well. We saw a patient who had inhaled a certain chemical from a glue from his work, actually. So it was an occupational exposure. Mm-hmm. He was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia. After he was discharged, a couple weeks later, he had kidney failure. Ugh. He had kidney failure. And I really applaud Lestenak for doing so much work to get him the kidney biopsy he needed to confirm that he had vasculitis. So and let me note that this patient was on emergency Medi-Cal. Yeah. Right. So he couldn't just walk into a hospital.
So you've got a high risk population that is a fringe group. I'll say fringe. That's an awful sounding word, but they're not in the mainstream. They don't make much money. They don't speak English, and therefore they don't get the kind of care or treatment that the rest of us would demand. And you're saying there are some free clinics set up by some Catholic. No, I'm a good Irish Catholic. I like to hear that. Some sister doing good. What's the name of the clinics again?
The clinics, they're called Lestenak Free Clinics, and they're under the leadership of Edward Gerber and Rosalie Corliss. They have really expanded, and they're doing so much great work for the underserved.
The underserved. There you go. All right. So you're talking about an underserved, not just population, but condition. Do we call it a disease? Do we call it a what's the correct terminology here? We call it a disease. Is that what this is?
Yeah, silicosis is a fibrotic disease.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, give me some hope. Is anybody you've discovered this potential, I won't say cure, but treatment for this? It doesn't get rid of silicosis, but maybe it prevents it from happening. It sounds like it prevents this storm from taking place and the fibrosis, the scarring that leads to all these other problems. Is this something they take in advance? Is this something they take once they get the storm effect and it quiets it down? It doesn't reverse the effect, but somehow it doesn't cure it, but somehow it either prevents it from happening or it settles it down quickly. Is that what this drug does?
So in this study, in the animal model, after they exposed the mice to silica, they then treated them with rimatroban around day 21. So this is actually mind-boggling, because rimatroban can be used as a treatment, not just as a preventative measure. Right. And rimatroban doesn't prevent the storm, because if you block all lipid mediators, then it can cause dysfunction in another way, because cells need these lipid mediators for signaling processes. Right. So rimatroban blocks the maladaptive effect, or the bad effect of the storm on the body.
All right. And so it can be treated 21 days. That means you got to get to this disease quickly before it escalates and the storm creates this kind of massive problem in your body here. But again, Dr. Trinh, the problem is what? You've got a population that doesn't come in real quickly and speak English, and probably doesn't go to the doctor very often. If they do, they're going through emergency practices only. It's a triage. We got gunshot wounds, we got pregnancies, we got broken legs, we got car accidents, and you come in complaining of coughing or something. It's probably not the place to make a deep analysis of what's going on. All these things, right?
And plus, rimatroban needs to go through human clinical trials to address and see if it's equally effective as the mouse.
And who's going to do this if the drug company can't make any money at this generic drug? That seems to be the end. Are we swimming against the storm? Are we fighting tilting at windmills. We're fighting a fight that we're never going to win because the drug companies, no matter how effective this is, won't bring it to the market here? What do you think, guys? What do you think, Dr. Kate? I know you're fascinated by this and you're trying to say, look what I found. But if the drug companies go, so what? There's no money in it.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, there's still a lot of work that has to go into this, right? We've only seen the use of this drug in a preclinical model, like Dr. Trinh said, and we do need human clinical trials to really see if this is effective in people.
And
it's
who's gonna fund that if there's no money in the model here? If I can't make money with this drug, would they have to modify it somehow to create a new patentable product here?
Perhaps, yeah. It's still in the making, I guess.
Okay.
We're hoping you can help out, Paul. You got a few bucks?
I got a few bucks. I'm at UCI's Applied Innovation Center. There's all these bright young minds running around trying to use drugs, develop new drugs. You got a drug that's already been around a long time. But again, so who produces it in Japan? Why does anybody even produce it in Japan? There's no money for it anywhere. Why is it available there?
Right. So it's produced by Kotopiki Pharma, which is actually a generic company. So they specialize in the production of generics. So that's why it's still being produced. The drug was originally a bear medication. So it was invented by a bear. So once the patents kind of expired, they shifted their focus to other medications. And then this generic company was producing rimatroban.
And do they have distribution here in the U.S.? Could they pay for the clinical trials that would allow it to be publicly sold in the U.S., or is that's not their model? That's not their game.
I don't believe that's their model. Yeah, they don't distribute in the U.S.
They just pick up. So what do you think? I guess what I'm saying is the frustration is you found something, and even with more proof and all the research that this bright young mind is doing here, Dr. Trinh and her father, are we just is it all for naught because nobody's going to do anything with it because of money?
Well, we're going to highlight through shows like this and through talks that perhaps maybe with grassroots supports and making a louder noise, that some attention would be paid to this on the potential. And we're saying potential because we don't know until clinical trials are done.
Right.
Of generic medications that may be effective for current health conditions today.
Yeah. Including COVID, which that's why I thought everybody would jump on this, because COVID is the drug, a disease of the day. At least it was a couple of years ago. It was all we talked about. And any of this, oh my God, you get any potential thing. What was the other drug that the President Trump was trying to push on everybody, and then everybody pushed back? What was that one called? It was being used for some other disease.
There's a few. There's Plaquenil. There's there's several, which of course, like anything else, needs to go through clinical trials and things of that sort.
Right. And he and others were for a while saying, just take this drug, and it's being used for something else, but it's available, use it. And then there was a whole pushback saying, no, it doesn't do anything. In fact, maybe it causes more problems or something here. I don't know. The point being that there was a lot of discussion of trying to take existing medications and using them in a different purpose. So I would think everybody would have jumped on this. But you're telling me there wasn't this outpouring response. The National Institute of Health didn't go, oh boy, we got another one, and immediately rush to investigate this. They seemed, despite your efforts, despite your research, despite your published studies and your anecdotal evidence, the NIH wasn't jumping up and down to investigate this one. Is that true?
Right, exactly. But we're very fortunate to have platforms like OC Radio and news channels, right, that are willing to really talk about this important issue. And that's how we were able to get funding from a philanthropic organization, rather, who are really monitoring this whole process and making sure that we have our deliverables and we're really getting this done.
well, let's get the founders of Facebook on here. And why they picked this here. They probably didn't even see it. They just fund it, and somebody else runs their philanthropic organization here.
Open Philanthropy, they of course have physicians and scientists, right, in their foundation who coordinate all of this, right, and make sure that the rationale is strong enough to fund, for example, rimatroban.
Yeah, it doesn't mean just because they got endless money that they're going to endlessly throw it away. They're going to make sure it's used properly here. I'd love to get somebody on from that organization and talk about why I'm sure they fund lots of things, but maybe why they picked to support this. Your evidence apparently was compelling enough for them to throw some money at this thing here.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe give it a few years when Kate is maybe 20 years old, she may have more credibility.
Well, she'll have 20 degrees by then here. Yeah.
Yeah, and 100 publications on her by then.
Yeah, right. We won't even be able to get to her by then. She'll be so famous and so hard to reach. Now she's available to us, but then who knows?
Yeah.
She's Jonas Salk. She's invented a cure for polio or something here by then.
Absolutely.
All right. So this is a condition that goes underreported, partly because it's the population it affects. It's by Dr. Trin's admission, a rare disease that most people don't think about very often. And you've identified a problem and a potential, what do we say, treatment. It's not a cure. It doesn't make it go away, but it helps prevent this from happening or getting out of control here. Where do you think you take this next year? Is it just pure research? You're just into the pure research of it. Wow, look what I found, and then look at this, and look at this. I'm trying to find the end result here. Is it take 10 years for this to manifest itself and turn into something? Is it just another interesting research product that gets put on the shelf and forgotten about? Where do you see this whole thing going?
Well, I see it going to clinical trials, right, when we apply for more government funding. And I think that due to this article published in JAMA, I think it's going to be brought to the government's attention, right? And hopefully the government will start focusing on it more and have funding opportunities for a clinical trial.
So the government, you're saying the government, the NIH may actually fund some more studies of this to try and attract some interest to it here or to pursue it. They might do it just as pure research, just to say, look, we took it further and this really does do something. Doesn't somebody want to produce this? Doesn't somebody want to distribute this?
Right. And of course, there's funding for orphan indications, meaning that for rare diseases, they already have funding mechanisms in place.
We should put you together we just did a show with, follow me for a second. I'll see if I can explain this. One of the podcasts we just produced as a trial for a giant organization that you've probably both heard of. You've certainly heard of the publications. It's a company called Elsevier. Elsevier produces the British medical journal Lancet and 1,000 other publications here. They're a European company. They produce all sorts of medical publications. I want to say 1,000 or more for these, very specific kinds of situations. And these publications also, they have an initiative called Year of the Tiger. I think it's the Year of the Tiger. I may have it wrong. I'd have to go back and listen, but it's basically an initiative pushing orphan drugs and diseases to investigate these small things that there isn't a big enough market for here. And we just did a podcast for them here. And I wonder if there's some connection here. I have no idea. I don't know if they're funding the research or just reporting the research. But they have this, it's a billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company with all this stuff here. And oddly enough, they came on one of our shows. They liked what we did, and we helped them produce some podcasts about this organization and the work they're doing. I wonder if there's some connection to be made there. What do you think? Anything? Am I grasping for straws here? Am I grasping for connections that may not exist here? Who knows? Well, I'll look into that for you here. So how are you going to do all this if you're going to medical school? You can't go to medical school right now. There's too much research to be done.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was thinking about just recently. How I will balance research between schooling and trying to work on all of this, and I'll just take it one day at a time. Right. I don't know what my schedule is yet for medical school, and like, of course, I really want to become a good physician. Right.
Right.
Even being able to connect right a patient's symptomatology to their work. Right. When my dad was diagnosing the patient, he started to ask questions. What do you do for a living? Right. And I wondered to myself, why are you asking that? How does that have anything to do with
Right.
the patient's symptomatology? And it had everything to do with it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
being able to do that, I want to be a good physician like that.
Does anybody ever ask those questions, Dr. Trinh? Nobody ever asked me what I do for a living. They ask me what the problem is. They go, oh, I stick my tongue out, and then they give me a pill or they give me a prescription or procedure.
Yeah, and they should. That question isn't asked too often. Most of the time, we ask about your past medical history. Your do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol?
Right.
But yeah, work environment influences our health.
Yeah.
Whether you're in the machine shop where you're exposed to chemicals versus working somewhere else, it does influence health, and it's an important question to ask during the medical intake. Absolutely.
Well, for example, this, I was going to say something silly like, I get hoarse a lot because I talk a lot. But I have lost a little bit of hearing because I probably cranked these headphones up a little too loud and everything here. And I've noticed over the years I've lost a little bit of hearing. And I'm sure it's because I wear headphones all the time and probably over amplify it here. So, yeah, I never thought of that before. Nobody ever asked me, what do you do? And maybe that provides some insight into, oh, I wasn't going to think of this, but maybe you got silicosis because, oh, you're cutting this marble dust all the time. Yeah, okay, I should look at that. I should give a different word. I just am amazed by all that you do. You are so mature seems like a silly word to use, but you seem wise beyond your years. You seem to present yourself very well. Nobody would think you're 18 years of age. You clearly are, very well versed in this subject, and you present. You don't say a lot of, well, like could it be like, sort of like this and everything. I expect you to talk like my daughter did at that age here. Well, Dad, it's like this. Could be, like a. You don't sound like that. How do your classmates and your friends and everybody, does everybody look at you and say, oh, this is like, we got a little Mozart here. We got some little, little precocious, prodigy here.
No, I admit I do act a little bit differently around my friends. Naturally, right?
Right.
And my friends are also very mature for their age, especially considering we go to a very academically rigorous school. So we're taught from a young age to present ourselves well and
Yeah.
to score high on exams.
Well, it shows. And my hat's off to your father and to your friends and your organization. You give us all hope when I tend to think that your generation is a bunch of slackers and hackers and just want a handout and a quick trip to the top. And how do I become a vice president? And I'm not going to work at this and just give me the answer right now, today. I don't see a lot of that kind of effort that earlier generations did to get where they're going. It's everybody wants a quick answer and a quick path and an immediate result. And you're working on something that's not immediate, and you're hanging in there and working on something very long term. My hat's off to you here. Your father's got to be amazed. I'm sure he's proud, but he's got to be amazed that you picked up and ran with this thing. He's just explaining to his daughter some technical thing that he's doing, hoping that she'll understand any of it, and then she won't say, yeah, Dad, give me the car keys next here. That's all I want. It's real interesting what you're doing. Can I borrow the car now and let's go? But you really grabbed onto this and ran with it here.
What part of medicine excites you, Kate? Because there's so many facets of medicine. There's cardiology, pulmonology, brain health,
or research, just pure research.
Yeah. What excites you in medicine?
Oh, I get so excited by the immune system because it involves every single organ system, right? The immune system is the whole body, and particularly platelets. So that's why I'm really excited about University College Dublin, because they have a world-class laboratory working on platelets. So I'm excited to continue my research over there and long term.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We're casually discussing the discovery of a underreported disease, and perhaps a treatment for it that's already available on the shelf, all being presented by an 18-year-old who's skipping college and going straight to med school. That's the kind of discussion we have every day on this channel here. You're one of some. This is just so ordinary for us. I have this kind of discussion all the time here. No, we're in a world where Barbie just came out, and too many kids are obsessed with Barbie, and adults too. And Barbie to me is the epitome sort of a brainless sort of, bubble happy existence. It's I guess that's fun, and that's why we're embracing it. But it isn't Barbie's not, by her own admission, a very serious thinker here.
I'm going to go see it.
Why not? We all want that silly cartoon existence, and it has some deeper messages, I guess, about, Barbie comes to realize there's more to the world than just her plastic existence here, and girls can do anything. And I get it. There's some messages behind this, but at the end of the day, it's about, let's just be brainless and let's just go out and party and dress in pink and have fun. Don't we all want to do that? But not Kate Chiang. While everybody's dressing in pink, she's looking into the pink insides of my body here and trying to find some hidden connections there. I'm just amazed. I'm amazed. I'm trying to find ways to explain this here, because this just blows my mind, this whole discussion here.
Dysfunction of the immune system touches everything from cancer, right? You make cancer cells every day. Every day our body makes cancer cells, and we don't get cancer every day because our immune system functions appropriately in detecting and getting rid and clearing up cancer cells. When the immune system do not recognize the cancer cells any longer, it's when those cells are allowed to grow. And that's just with cancer, with every condition. When the immune system doesn't work properly, we get into trouble. That includes Alzheimer's, right? Alzheimer's is dysfunction of the immune system as well, and we see as a result of that inflammation in the brain, right? Inflammation of the brain is simply dysfunction of the immune system. And so most of our health conditions is somehow linked to the health of the immune system. Whether it's underactive or overactive, you get into problems. Underactive immune system is HIV.
There you go.
Right? That's an underactive immune system.
There you go. And what do we call that? An immunologist? Is that what somebody who studies the immune system? Is that what that term is?
Yeah. Immunologists, hematologists, immunologists, but everything in medicine somehow relates back to the immune system.
Well, what are the people at Dublin College going to think of you already having research and published papers on something? You're not supposed to know anything. You're a blank slate. You're walking in, and they're going to fill you with knowledge, and you're going to be like, "Well, but look, did I tell you about the study I've done?" And the professor's going to look like, "Who is this kid? What do you mean the studies you've done? Just shut up and take notes." Yeah, you're not here to question. You're here to just learn. You're here to absorb our wisdom here.
Well, as the days go on, I realize the more and more I don't know. Medicine is so expansive, and I'm just so excited to learn so much more in medical school that I can ever fathom, truly.
So she admits there's something she doesn't know. Well, that's a start. Okay. I wasn't sure there was anything yet she hadn't figured out. Well, it's an amazing journey. I wish you all the best. I hope you will continue this research, because you've taken it already farther than your father. He was just sketching something on a piece of paper for you here. That started your brain thinking. All of a sudden, you start researching it. All of a sudden, hey, Dad, why don't we publish some papers on it here? You can get this done if you put your name on it. And how do we do this? And then you're finding other research in other countries. Hey, Dad, look at this. Maybe it can also be used to this. And he's like, I was just trying to show you an idea of what I'm doing here. I wasn't.
Yeah, Dad's just attaching his name to Kate.
I think he is. Dad's just riding along at this
yeah.
point in time here. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a team effort. Team effort.
I hear a lot of Kate, and I hear a lot of Dad saying, "Okay, where do I sign?" Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. What happens next? After you go to school, when do you go to school? You go to school in the fall or next year?
Yeah, August 29th, I'm leaving.
Leaving to Dublin
Nice.
here. Well, go check out. Take a little time to check out Dublin. It's an amazing place. I've been there. Lots of I know you're probably not into going to a pub or something, but go to a pub and try some of the Irish, because the pub is where they all hang out. It isn't just where they drink. It's the center of their whole social existence over there. Everybody,
Irish
rich and
liqueur.
poor. Yeah.
Irish liqueur. But Kate's too young. She's not allowed to drink yet. Paul, do you have any family members you can visit out in Ireland?
Oddly enough, I do. I don't know how to put her in touch with it. Here's a real quick story. Maybe I don't want this to take too long here, but I went on Ancestry a couple of years ago because, like most Americans, once they came over on the boat, we can't go past that point. And the immigrants who came over don't tell anybody their stories. We're Americans now. Who cares where we came from? I'm not going to tell you any of that. And so it's very hard. Most people lose their ancestry at that moment here in the United States. Somebody comes over on a boat, and that's all we know. They came over on a boat, and we don't know where they came from, who they are, or any connection. But oddly enough, my great-grandfather, one of my great-grandfathers who came from Ireland in the potato famine in the 1840s, when 1/3 of the population died, 1/3 of them left, and 1/3 of them stayed behind. There were 3 million people, 1/3 of a million died, 1 million left.
Wow.
That's why there's so many in the U.S. And that was the first mass immigrant wave into this country, which had the same backlash, anti-immigration. Go look it up in the 1840s, anti-Irish, anti-immigration. It was a huge deal. That was the first wave of who are these people, and we don't want them, and they're poor, and they're drunk, and they're uneducated, and they're filthy, and just stay away. Anyway, go on Ancestry, and I discovered that my great-grandfather was born on a boat fleeing the famine. Now, the boat was only 30 feet long, and it filled with 300 people. I mean, they packed these boats. And so guess what? Many of them died. They called them coffin ships. So many of them died. And it's even more amazing that a pregnant woman gets on the boat, gives birth, and the baby lives. Because it takes a month or more to go on a little sailboat across the Atlantic Ocean. It's not a day or two. And there's no sanitary, there's no place to go to the bathroom. There's no nothing. You're just 300 people on this little boat bobbing, and everybody's sick and throwing up and going to the bathroom all over the place here. It's not a very healthy environment. And this baby lived. And the reason he lived was because it was the only boat owned by an Irishman who insisted on having a doctor. Everybody else, they were English, and the English hated the Irish. They were just dogs, just pack them in. Who cares? And so he said no. And this boat became famous because it had a higher survival rate. And there is a famine museum in Ireland chronicling this whole tragic incident where 1/3 of the population left, 1/3 of them died during this great famine over a couple of years. And when the potato crop collapsed, and it was literally the only thing that these poor Irish ate. So when there's no potato, they starved to death in mass or flee. Imagine getting on a boat. You're 9 months pregnant. You can't wait another week or two. She's that desperate. She gets on a boat to try and get out, and this baby's born. So the boat was called the Jeannie Johnston. There's a replica of it in the Irish Famine Museum, and a statue of my great-great-grandmother holding my great-great-grandfather there. I didn't know any of this until I went on Ancestry, and somebody contacted me from Ireland and said, "Are you related to this guy?" I said, "Yeah." It was a shameful story in my family's history. Nobody wanted to talk about it. She said, "It's celebrated here in Ireland," and they connected us with she was writing a book on this. It's called All Standing. There's a book on Amazon called All Standing, The Amazing Story of the Jeannie Johnston. And it's mostly my family's history. And they connected us with the relatives who stayed behind, and they still owned the farm in a town called Tralee, where they had the big Rose Festival in the south part of Ireland. Dublin's more like kind of on the eastern coast. This is more on the western coast. And Tralee, and I've never been there I've connected with them, but yeah, they're still there. They still have the farm where these people fled from. And I thought, I'd love to go back and meet these people and do it. So maybe you can go look up you can say the guy that interviewed me, you can relate this story and go see the Famine Museum in Dublin, if nothing else, and learn this story, and go see the Jeannie Johnston and send me a picture of the Jeannie Johnston parked in the back on the river there, that my infamous relative, fled from here. There you go. There's a whole quick story here. So
Yeah,
you have
it's a
another
shame.
assignment. You have to go to the Family Museum and send me a picture of you standing next to the Jeannie Johnston that carried my great-grandfather to this country here. All right. So, yes, you asked a question you should never ask. Ask me about my Irish ancestry here, and I'll tell you all these great tales about it here. But we are all subject. Your father is from where? From India?
From India, yeah.
And but Chiang is not an Indian name. It's a Chinese.
I have my mother's last name. She's from Taiwan.
Taiwan. Okay. So, and Dr. Trinh talks about, and has had people on talking about his boat person experience, literally fleeing the country of Vietnam as it fell, being one of those refugees thrown out and coming to America with nothing. I mean, we're all a land of immigrants and refugees for the most part, other than the Native Americans who come from here. And I don't think that's a story that gets told too often. It gets forgotten quickly as we get absorbed into the culture here. So I think there is something to be, and now you're dealing with an immigrant population. Again, maybe there's some connection between all this. I don't know. Fascinating way to look at it. All right, Kate Chiang, I hope you'll come back and keep us updated on your amazing journey, because it's inspirational, it's educational, and it's amazing. We're going to put the word amazing in front of Kate Chiang. That's going to be part of your permanent, the amazing Kate Chiang. Thank you so much for coming. Is there any way anybody can reach out to you or find you, or do you want anybody to connect with you? Any way?
Yeah, certainly. Like, I guess we can put my email in the description.
So tell it to us. So there's a robot that's taking notes right now. So tell us your email here.
Oh, okay. It's Kate, KATECC 789 @outlook.com.
Okay. And give it one more time, because the robot's slow. Kate
CC 789 @outlook.com.
Okay. All right. And does that mean anything, or that was just you were the 789 person who applied for that email?
Well, my dad is Hindu, so we really believe in lucky numbers. So 789 are considered lucky numbers in Hinduism.
8 and 9 certainly is. I'm told in China and in Taiwan, people will pay millions of dollars if you can get an 8 or a 9 in your license plate. 8 or 9s are very lucky numbers. I didn't know 7, but I know 8 and 9s are very lucky here. All right. Well, it's lucky you came to us today here.
Yeah, Kate, we want you back maybe toward the end of the year here, so you can tell us all about medical school.
I'd love to.
But you have to have a picture from the Famine Museum of that boat.
Yeah. Check it out.
Not letting you back on unless you have that. Yeah.
It's assignment number 1 for med school, Famine Museum in Ireland.
Exactly.
All right, I'll jot it down.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for coming. And Dr. Trinh, take us out. I'm flabbergasted. I'm running out of words, and that's hard to believe, because I'm Irish. I can talk forever.
That is hard to believe, but anyway, thanks, Kate. We will do part 3 maybe toward the end of the year. I would love to have you come back, give us any new update in the world of research, and let us know how medical school is coming along in Dublin, Ireland, and let us know how Ireland is overall. We'd love to hear about that.
It's fabulous. It's a wonderful.
Yeah.
Although it's a little dreary. I wonder why, in addition to the famine, so many left. It's either really sunny or really rainy. There's no in between, which is why it's green, because it rains all the time. It's like, oh my God, it can be very dreary, particularly in the winter, very dreary and overcast and everything, which is why they drink all the time, I think, just to drown their sorrows and cheer themselves up here. But anyway, it's a place where everybody, I'll tell you my one experience, and I'll let you go with this. So I go to Ireland once. This is way before I knew this story. And go to Dublin, and I'm walking down the street, and I'm looking for O'Connell Street, which is probably one of the biggest streets runs through Dublin, and because I'm looking for Trinity College, which is off of that, and famous school. And there's you also got to look at the is it the Book of Kell? I think it is. It's a giant fabric that they found that tells the history of Ireland from the 1100s or some crazy Anyway, it's a famous fabric that's displayed. So I'm trying to find this street. And I walk up to somebody and I say, where's O'Connell Street? Excuse me, I'm from the U.S. Where's O'Connell Street? And like I'm doing, they start telling a huge story. Oh, O'Connell Street, where my mother met me father. What a rat he turned out to be. If only my mother had stayed away from that accursed street, she'd never. And I'm like, is it left or right? I don't want to know the whole story of your family in O'Connell Street here. Just, which way do I go? That's the way Irish are. At the drop of a hat, they'll tell you their whole life story. So be prepared to talk. All right, good. Thank you so much. Dr. Trinh, take us out.
Have a safe flight. Have a safe trip. We'll look forward to keeping in touch with you. And I'm sure I will overall. And we'll see you back on here in a few months. Take care, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me. We had an excellent discussion today. I had a great time.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
And you got some travel tips when you go to Dublin here. All right.
Yes.
Well, there you have it. One more reason to tune in. If that isn't an amazing tale, I don't know what is. The kind of discussions you just don't get anywhere else, except here on Health Talks. Streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.